that's not necessarily a goal.
Right.
But
it's only more recent that people are really into that theater circuit, really, you know?
So what is the metrics of success for being a comedian who's able to pay your bills and do your art form and not have to work at the phone company for 8 hours before begging Ray to get up on stage for $20?
That's a very
for me,
question.
I created my own way. I created my own way.
Yeah.
At first I was a promoter, then I was a producer, and then I became a stand-up comedian. So now I produce. The only reason why I was at Madison Square Garden is because it was my show.
All right.
It was my show. Nobody booked me
really showing
and
off,
put me on it. No, I'm saying, like, I don't have success like that as a comedian. And I used to pay Kevin Hart $25 to do my stage. I don't have his notoriety.
Yeah.
I created my own. You know, so it's a little different for me, but other comics, they rely on the gatekeepers. They rely on the producers, the timing. Mike Epps was in LA and Ice Cube happened to be sitting in the audience. And at that time, the timing was perfect because Chris Tucker just quit doing the Friday movies. And he saw Mike Epps and he said, this guy will be a good fit. And that's all, you know, that was it.
That's how it always happens.
So
that's why it always happens that way.
You both are gatekeepers, respectively, and Ice Cube happened to be in the audience that night. But looking at this broader landscape, and we're talking about writers' rooms and who's making this mass TV that's pushed out, who books the clubs and the rooms, who are the gatekeepers in comedy right now, and even the bookers on college campuses, if we're talking about hotbeds of...
That's a whole other...
That's all. Well, let's get into it. But before we do, I just want to let you all assembled know that if you have a question, you can make your way over to the aisle, and I'll make my way over to you if there's something that sparked or you want to address them. But on the subject of the gatekeepers of comedy, who are we beholden to that is really getting to decide who makes the world laugh?
Yeah,
thinking of diversity.
I think it depends, right? Because there's a more traditional avenue where you're trying to still get your 5 minutes for late night, that you get your late night, that you work on getting a special. Now with all the streamers, maybe there's more different places that you can get a special. Before it was just HBO, now we have Comedy Central, we have Netflix, we have Amazon. And I think social media is also a powerful tool where people are able to create their own lanes and circumvent that process by having their own fan base. And I think that creating your own content is king. And I think that if you have your own fan base, and it's just people that are following you, people on a mailing list, people that are subscribing to you, it's a lot harder to cancel you. It's a lot harder to censor you because you have the people that you can put your product directly to. And you are in control of your own success. But there's so many different ways that you could be successful.
That's also not good in a certain way because, you know, some people will do it like a funny video for 3 minutes. It'll go viral, and then they get booked at a club, and they don't have 45 minutes. And they don't know, you know, like, it takes 15 years to know what the fuck you're doing on that stage.
But this is not new.
Yeah, right, but it is new because, you know, I am of the era, people were going to audition for Saturday Night Live, or Evening at the Improv, or Caroline's Comedy, or all these shows. They did it live. That was it. There was no going on tape and, you know, you had to prove yourself.
But that also doesn't aggravate me because, again, the audience doesn't lie. So I used to think the same way, like I'm a stand-up comic, I'm a purist, the Instagram comedians aren't real comedians. But what I feel is like, Instagram comedy is good for comedy in general because it's making comedy more accessible. More of my friends care about what the fuck I'm doing now because they're following some other person. Now they're interested in comedy.
Right, but I'm just saying that they don't. In order to be a great comic, there's only one way to be a great comic is get on stage as much as possible, and that's it.
And I feel like it doesn't take away from what I do.
But you're not necessarily beholden to the gatekeepers as much anymore.
Yeah,
I don't think.
But to Judy's point, you know, that we're essentially stunt casting is really what we're talking about. This is not, go back to the days of vaudeville. You know, if you were in a major scandal, you know, public scandal in the days of vaudeville, they'd book you to come out on the vaudeville stage.
Stormy Daniels.
Well, I mean, she doesn't go back to vaudeville, but other than that.
I'm just using that as an example, you know.
But also in vaudeville, if you went out as a comic and you used the words heck or damn, you were handed your pictures on the way off the stage, and you were literally canceled.
Right.
Now, yes, we live in an age where you can go from the top down or the bottom up. Gatekeepers exist, but not in the way they used to.
So what's the accountability piece, if we're purportedly talking about accountability, what's the accountability piece for a gatekeeper figure versus an individual performer? If we're talking about systems here of comedy, where it's an individual thing versus a comedy industrial complex.
Not industrial.
Jesus Christ.
It's not a small money business.
Didn't Dwight Eisenhower talk about that?
I think it's a personal sensibility. Like, there are clubs that I love going to because they're run by people who love comedy.
Yep.
And there are clubs that are run by people who only count the numbers.
Right.
And it is so apparent to a comic what you're doing, and you get to the point, in the beginning, you have to take every gig you can get. It's all about stage time. And then you get old like me, and you're like, you know what, not worth it. I don't need to feel like that.
Yeah.
I don't need to do that anymore.
That's very true. And
Yeah.
I love comedy, and I am so particular about my club. It's starting on time, no
Right.
distractions. The audience, there's a recording that no cameras, no this, no that. If you're a heckler, you're going to
Get
be
the
escorted
fuck
out.
out,
There's a
yeah.
lot of things that you got to protect the integrity of comedy, to give the comedian an honest, platform to be able to perform.
Right.
And if you can't do that, you might as well not.
I don't
But
think
you
we
know
put,
what? Oh, sorry.
I don't think we put enough emphasis on us as us, not you guys, because you guys are doing it, but the consumers. I think we talk about the gatekeepers, and we talk about the comics who are out there, and we're worried that the comics are saying the wrong things and the gatekeepers are letting the wrong people in. How about if we just stop buying the things that we don't want to hear, right? So if we find the rooms that speak to our specific kind of subjective sense of humor, go to those rooms.
Is
When you
that just
find the
cancel
comic-
culture by another name?
I think so, and I think we should problematize cancel culture, because are we really canceling things out? Like Cale Hartman has a job still. Beth Stelling, had on Instagram had photos displayed of him harming her in
Cale
2015.
Hartman is- But he's not in any way performing in live performances, and he's been kicked out
But
of
he's-
every comedy club in New York City.
But he still has getting paid.
Say again?
He's still getting paid, and Louis C.K. is still getting paid, and
Well, yeah,
Bill
he's gonna
Cosby's
keep
become a
getting paid. He's a
celebrity
brilliant
prisoner.
comic.
So
like-
do you book Louis, Rebecca?
I do, and I'm going to continue to book him.
Do you book Cosby on his out of prison tour?
No.
No.
Cosby's a whole other-
That's a whole other situation. We're not talking of what happened with Cosby was way greater, and I have no interest in comparing the two. It doesn't make any sense to compare the two.
I agree with you. In fact, I saw Cosby in the last performance you could go to and not throw up, because literally 3 days after, it all broke wide open.
When
And I was
Tucker
one of
put
those
the
who did not
article
know beforehand.
You didn't.
I did not.
Almost
knew.
everyone in the comedy world was very well aware.
Well,
and had
everyone
been
in the
well aware
comedy
for
world should have
decades.
been talking louder.
You
But
can't. Look at
We
the-
did.
Yeah. Well,
we talked
with
about it
each other.
openly amongst each other.
But that's a separate issue. I mean, the bottom line is there is a difference. I agree with you. But it comes down to, and we've danced around this all show, is when we talk about cancel culture, what are we canceling? And what is it to cancel? I mean, Cosby is a felon. I mean, he's not somebody who said something wrong.
Yeah.
He is a predator. And, and it kills a lot of us. I do a radio comedy show bi-weekly on WRFI, Watkins Glen, Ithaca. And I don't play Cosby anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, and he
that
has...
sucks because his stand-up
It's
was so
brilliant.
good.
Yeah.
So wait, if
Brilliant.
we can cancel this person that we're talking about right now, this is an instance where you can't separate the art from the artist, but there are still people bopping the R. Kelly, or there's
just gonna
still
say.
there are still
take
people
Michael away
who
from
are
us. Right. It's
who
not gonna
still want to
happen.
rock with you. There are people who go and watch Woody Allen movies, or
But it's a
I don't play
different
Woody
art
anymore
form.
either.
Well, that's a
Back with
different.
me
so
art
this is
form.
what I'm getting at. The art form matters, whereas maybe the answer's blowing in the wind. There used to be musicians and rockers out there leading a social consciousness. Is the balance
But you're
different for
talking about
comedians now?
Bill Cosby, who went around, saying horrible things to young black guys,
Yeah.
like pull up your pants and do and do
Stop
this and do
cursing
that.
and grow
Meanwhile,
up.
Right.
he's
And
a
he did-
hypocrite.
Right,
Yeah.
and he did kids do the darndest
Yeah.
things. So
He
yeah,
was doing the darndest thing.
So let's. Too soon. Let's. Can we take it up
It's too soon if it's funny.
Right.
to the
Sorry, yeah,
10,000 square foot view then, and not individually talk about that person, but separating, because as I mentioned, in music and film and other art forms, they might be despicable people, but there's still a value to their art. But with a
People hold
comedian,
comedians to a different standard.
that's what I'm getting.
Michael Jackson,
But is
not,
that
not proved
fair?
guilty of anything.
Yeah.
Certainly a lot of smoke.
Yeah.
Maybe yes, maybe no. R. Kelly, good God. But I love his music and I can dance to it, so oh well.
Yeah.
A comedian says one wrong thing, we never want to hear from this
yeah,
person
but
again.
I don't think that's true in music, because I'm on radio 103.9. I have my own radio show. We don't play R. Kelly.
Everyone's got a radio show here.
We don't.
Well, the rest of you have
Where's
podcasts.
And
We're
we
all
very quickly forgive
no.
the
The
people who
music
say the wrong
industry,
things.
I think-
the music industry were outraged, and they did respond, and they stopped playing his music.
I don't
So
think it has anything to do with the particular art. I think we're going to make excuses and try to find these caveats based on what makes us feel bad. And
Yeah.
all we're trying to do
Yes.
is ease our cognitive dissonance. There is no difference between Bill Cosby, listening to Bill Cosby and R. Kelly and Michael Jackson. It just
or Louis
depends on...
C.K. I just
but
heard
these
3
are-
black men in a row. Is that a part of it? Because I've heard it racialized before.
All right, put Woody Allen in the mix too.
Yeah, throw him in there.
And Roman Polanski and David Bowie, because y'all be acting like he wasn't a
Kevin
pedophile.
Spacey.
Like, oh, okay, sorry.
Well, and I also think that the difference between the musicians, you're talking about Michael Jackson and R. Kelly, but what about the Stones? What about the hundreds upon hundreds of thousands of stories about Motley Crue and all the rest of them
Yeah.
that were treating women and dogs and
Elvis.
guitars terribly,
We have a team
destroying
ride.
people's lives?
I agree.
We hold
He
them
gets
to a
to-
different standard.
Did you say
Let
guitar?
musicians act a
Alice in
fool,
Wonderland.
but Aziz Ansari can't go on a bad date
Yeah,
and
that
get
was a
away
bad
with it.
date.
It's
That was
ridiculous.
a bad
Wait,
date.
what about Coco Chanel was a Nazi? I mean,
Was she?
That's a fact.
she was a Nazi.
That is a fact.
I never
You're a
heard
foreign
of
Nazi?
Yes.
She was a Nazi. They're all walking around with her, Jews
Yeah.
are like walking around with
Don't
Coco.
pick on Jews.
Yeah, but we also all use phones still made by child slaves. So it's like we all said that. We're not giving up our iPhones and our Samsungs, so we all figure out what our lines
Right.
are. It's a very
So
individual
we have a question, but I
quiet
want you guys to percolate on this idea of woke comedians. Then, who are the woke comedians, and are they funny? Is it all woke and no joke, as Adam Carolla
All
said?
woke and
But
joke, child.
let's get into this.
Okay, for me, honestly, what I find is, if you're dealing with comedy, honestly, is that there is a hypocrisy that is within comedy and within the business of comedy. What I find is that it oftentimes, unfortunately, can be racially motivated. And on the other side, there is a kind of disconnect with how many people have done so many wrong in comedy and how many times they have been forgiven. And I think that when you talk about Bill Cosby, you have to understand it was a different time. I remember somebody was telling me in the 70s, people had cocaine spoons around their neck. It was a different time. The promiscuity and everything that was going on in that business. And I say this, if a woman or a man comes by your house at 3 o'clock in the morning, there's only one thing they want. They're not asking for a cup of sugar. That's what I'm saying. And when you deal with certain things, you have to realize that people, for some reason, they don't get. Okay, Bill Cosby, yes, maybe he was a predator, but in order to be able to be a predator, why are the prey coming to him? You know what I'm saying?
Wait a minute, wait.
I hope you don't have a public job.
He drugged them.
They gonna try to take
Wait.
It's never been the right decade
That's
for
another
drugging
show.
someone.
That's a whole other town hall, yes?
That's another show.
But I wonder, are you buying ticket for the Bill
What can I
Bill
say?
Cosby
Hey,
comeback
hey,
tour?
Just
Are you
be
going?
careful. Don't
What I'm
put your
saying
foot
to
in
you is
they gonna
this.
try to cancel
I'm
you
not
next
going
week.
to, what I have learned to do is I realize that people make mistakes. And they may make a whole bunch of mistakes. But the thing is, what is the difference? And I'm going to say this, and it's going to be very bad. What is the difference between
Can't be
pedophile
worse.
priests
Yeah.
that are still priests and Bill Cosby, who is also a predator, And I'm saying that half of these children, if you look at the pedophile thing that's going on, they went through a lot of stuff. So let me say, talk back to comedy. Comedy hits on the heart, the heartbeat, the pain, the angst, the fears, everything that you can think about in the entire culture. And when you try to censor it, when you try to say that certain things should not be said, what ends up happening is nothing is said.
You should live with that, girl.
I
love that part. I can get on board with that.
Let me answer your question.
I can get on board with
the
that last
difference
part.
between Bill Cosby and the pedophile priest. The difference is prosecution. We haven't prosecuted the priest. That doesn't mean we let Bill Cosby off. It means we prosecute the priests.
Yeah. But there's, you were talking about cancel culture and, who decides this. There's a difference between cancel culture and not liking a comic and turning the fucking channel.
Yeah.
If you don't like the comic, turn the channel and shut the fuck up. You don't have to start a riot about this one's horrible and I'm offended. Okay?
And no one should be able
when
to
you hear
enjoy it.
Right. You hear a song you don't like, what do? You change the fucking channel. Just do, why is it different?
There's so many people now, though, who are profiting from this moniker of being the outrageous bad boy, canceled kind of thing, and they proclaim themselves to be free speech warriors, and they're fighting social justice warriors, and it's never been as profitable or as big for their careers, frankly.
Now, going back, again, I'm old, and I don't know how many of you...
I'm older.
No, I think you're younger than I am. By a few
probably.
years. You certainly look young.
I'm kidding.
You certainly look young. But going back, I don't know how many of you remember Don Rickles.
Oh,
Don Rickles made his entire career on insulting people. He wasn't terribly huge on foul language and racial slurs, but he used them.
Hockey puck.
Sure.
But,
Use racial
I mean,
slurs.
I always said, I listened to him, I laughed, and I felt dirty afterwards. But at the end of his show, he always did this little
Disclaimer.
The little disclaimer. We love everybody. We're all equal. But he was funny.
Right, because he was leveling the playing field.
And he was
that
honest
we're
about what he was
all
doing.
People. All we are people.
Yeah.
You're this, you're that. We're all funny. We all find funny things. And he was the nicest guy in the world. Like they say that he was the kindest. And you could tell that you can tell if a comedian is kind and coming from a vulnerable place and treats everyone equally, and an asshole.
And
You
also,
could tell.
Only 3 of us had televisions back then.
We have a
So nobody
question
saw the
here.
guy. But if we had social media, it would have been a different thing.
Yeah.
Hi, my question is about relatability and the rule of relatability for your audiences as comedians and bookers and such. We talked about women aren't funny. A lot of that I feel like, as the work that I've done, comes from the fact that I tried to do jokes about things that were not relatable to the entire audience. However, there is a problem with that as well. And that was my question, was can we elaborate on perhaps why the language that women use, the experience that women have, is different for half of their audience of any, and that's basically my question.
I'd love to answer that. I think we live in a patriarchy. Newsflash, it's happening. And we are in a position where women's voices and experiences don't matter as much as men's. And so as long as we've been indoctrinated with women as being inferior and their lives as being inferior, when you get on stage and you take the microphone and you want people to listen to what you're saying, they already believe that what you have to say is not going to be as interesting as the guy standing in the wings who's going to go on next. So you have to convince them otherwise. So women are constantly doing extra work on stage in order to just get where men can already be as soon as they step onto stage.
So Dave Chappelle got into a little trouble during his comedy special when he talked specifically about the LGBTQIA plus community.
Yes.
I love you all. And the way that there's a pecking order. And he said, if you're a gay white man, you're at the top. If you're any other part of the LGBT sandwich that's in there, you might not get the first crack. So I'm wondering, in that spirit, what's the pecking order in the comedy world then? Looking at
It's
returns
just like the world.
and everything.
It's white male,
Yeah.
white male, white male. I started at a time first of all, there was never more than one woman on a show, if a woman at all.
By design.
And I remember in the 80s, right? In the 80s, I would call, you know, when I was
One woman,
starting,
one colored person. I heard
yes,
you
you
say.
could only have one woman and one black person. That was it.
That's weird.
And I remember calling clubs, like when I had first started.
Yeah.
I started at 19, and I would call these clubs, be like, "Hi, you know, my name's Judy Gold. I worked here, blah blah blah, and I want to." Oh, we had a woman here like 3 months ago, and she didn't do well, so we're not booking women for the next few months. And it was ridiculous.
Yeah.
And it's still this way.
It's
Three
definitely
guys
still
on a
that way.
show is a show. 3 women on a show,
It's a
ladies'
lady
night
show.
out,
It's lady,
hysterical.
lady. Yeah.
You know, it's ridiculous.
And,
true.
and it's
Right.
it's real.
And for blacks, it's like urban night. You know, it's
So
ridiculous.
why is it so segmented? Why is there's an urban night, there's a hysterical,
Things
like,
happening because, you know,
Because
there's
because
people
the
who are
audience.
historically shut out of being able to have
so
the show.
this is
people
an
have created-
HBCU argument. We had to build our own
Yeah,
because
you
they
had
wouldn't
to
let
build
us
your
in.
own 'cause
And
you
then
won't
you
get
say
booked.
it's the artist, so it's self-selecting in 2019?
It's the audience.
The
It's
audience.
to separate the audience.
Yeah.
It's to have one kind of audience. It's
Right.
not to have one kind of comedian.
So is that why Monique is arguing that she's not getting the same as the most lauded woman in comedy
No,
No,
versus
that's not
Amy
why. That's
Schumer?
something else. That's
Let me
something-
stop
that's
you on
another-
that.
Well, what
that's
is it?
another
I'm asking.
Let me
discount
stop you.
for another day.
That's person. Let's go straight to Monique.
Okay.
Monique is in that position because Monique
To a person.
is a horrible person.
Okay.
I'm telling you that because firsthand I
TMZ.
booked
Say it
her.
right to her. They
I'm
put it
telling
to
you,
her.
listen, I'm telling you that because now people are people.
Right?
And folks
She's
that
a horrible
and people that book, whether you're a producer on
Yeah.
television, if you are horrible to work with, eventually, no matter how good you are, they're not going to work with you anymore. Her show wasn't canceled because the ratings weren't good. It got canceled because they didn't want to work with her no more.
Okay.
I've booked Monique in certain situations, and we got one hotel room wrong. And she made us put her in another hotel room and in some 5-star. It was ridiculous. And I said, you know what? This is the last time I'm ever going to work with her.
Right.
So she's dealing with that simply because of who she is. And behind closed doors, a lot of us don't know these personalities.
Right. Until you're confronted with the-
Personalities make a difference.
So wait, let's
wait, can I
remove her
just say
from the
something? I
just
equation
wanted
and
to say
talk
something
about
about
the
the bottom.
segmentation.
Women over 50. That is the
That's-
bottom.
that's as
you know,
low as it
I've
gets.
never been funnier.
Yeah.
And I cannot, I've been on, you
They're
know, I've had
laughing. They
HBO,
agree.
I've had Comedy Central, I've
Yeah.
been on, you know, I've had specials on, no one will give me a special. I'm not the demographic. But a guy over 50, hilarious. You know, they're hilarious.
I just want
Yeah.
to say something real quick about being a female comic. I think that I remember being told before I even got on stage, it's a certain way that you have to dress. You can't,
Sure.
it's distracting. People don't like pretty girls on stage, you know, try to dress down your look.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting that if you look at most comedy show audiences, they're predominantly women in the audiences. The audiences are always heavily skewed because it's girls' night out, some bachelorette party. You rarely see droves of bros coming through clubs.
Right.
So it's always like these lineups are predominantly men on it, but the audience has women. So when the person who posed the question asked about relatability, like people are thirsty for women to come on stage because we are the majority of the audience. But I will say this thing, comedy is very hard. Most comics just are not good. So if you have a lineup and it's 10 men and 1 woman, then the odds that the 1 woman is not, she might not be
Might not be
funny,
the
but there's
master
not
craftsman.
any more women.
Right,
You
it's a
might still
ratio
have
thing.
5 bad men, but you see 2 men that are good, and you
Right.
go, "Oh, this is okay." So they're just not seeing
The
us
ratio
as
of
much.
good women and good men is probably the same,
same.
but
It's
women
the
are
same.
probably a little funnier because we're more emotional and we think deeper, you know. But
And oppression
we
breeds
are,
justice.
right?
say
But I'm just saying, you know, like, but it's the same percentage. It's
Right.
just that there's more of
But,
them.
but there's a huge responsibility for the bookers. Like I try to stick to a 3 white guy maximum for my
Yeah.
lineups because it allows, it forces the audience members to see more women, to see more people of color, to see more people who are from a different walk of life than them, and they have a bigger opportunity to broaden their mind and to actually experience a real comedy experience instead of just listening to someone that they can agree with and nod their head to and not actually laugh at.
So Beck, is there, before we get to this question, is there a universal funny, like you've been studying this and looking at comedians out there, like is there someone who's gonna get booked by these two and get the special and they're beloved by the blacks and the whites and the
Kevin
gays
Hart.
and the Asians? So what's the sauce? Like how did Kevin Hart go from
okay.
making $25 with you
Some
to Madison
comedians-
Square Garden?
Some comedians, okay, so in New York, you have urban comedy rooms and
And
you
what the hell
have
does that mean?
mainstream.
What's
I know
urban
you don't
comedy?
like
What
that
it means to
distinction.
me
I
Yeah.
don't like that distinction.
is that most of the urban comedy rooms are in African American Latino communities.
So urban is
And
still
they take,
code
hold
for
on,
black.
they're not professional clubs.
Right.
They are bars or whatever kind of place that they can find, and they do
Repurposed.
comedy once a week.
Yeah.
Right.
So the comedy room.
Yeah, it's a comedy room.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
these kinds of comedians, they grow up differently in comedy because it's a distractive room. So when you work in a distractive room, you got a lot of things that are at play. So the
Right.
comedians learn how to snap
Yeah.
more as opposed to doing material. Like
Yeah.
when you go to a Caroline's, you can actually do jokes because it's set up that way.
Right.
So the urban comic, if he gets urbanized, he does all jokes only related to his community.
Right.
So if he goes somewhere else, it's not going to be relative to the audience. So I always tell the comedians, listen, think of universal stuff that we all go through.
Yeah.
We all got to take a shit. We all got
Well,
kids.
that's not the best.
Beck and I are now the only two who
Yeah.
have not cursed on the back.
Yeah.
My shit joke works everywhere.
Give us your shit joke, right?
But my Jamaican joke may not work in certain places.
Yeah.
But
So
also, you know, you're right. I mean, but I would go anywhere. I was like a warrior. And it's so important to go to those clubs and go to the traditional
Yeah.
clubs
Yeah. All of
and
them.
go
And
to the
handle the
all clubs.
theaters
Go.
and handle
That's
the-
what
All of
makes
them.
a good
Yes,
comic.
I agree.
went everywhere. I went to
100%.
lunchrooms in
And then when you have
Alabama.
a-
It was
yeah.
horrible.
And then when you have sometimes you have a set that can work in different rooms, and
Right.
it's fine. I went to Australia, didn't change anything, you know. So it just depends on the rooms. But I bristle a little bit at the term urban versus mainstream, and I know exactly what it means, but I just feel like we are trained that mainstream are the white rooms. And
Right.
and I know that black people are the mainstream. We are the purveyors of culture. Everything we do is mainstream.
Say
So
that.
I also think there needs to be a reframing
Yeah.
about it. This
Oh,
is not
yeah.
on you. This is
I
just what
agree.
we're in. You know what I mean?
And
We
can
mainstream.
we
Linden,
also add
that's
in the
mainstream.
LGBTQ or STUVWXYZ?
Thank you, all the BLT.
Thank you.
We have a question.
Good evening. Thanks for this amazing panel, this very entertaining and engaging discussion. I have so many thoughts, but in the name of brevity, I'll keep it brief. Earlier, you had mentioned about how certain groups didn't have agency to speak out before. I respectfully disagree. We've always had a voice, and that voice is with our time and with our wallet. Like you mentioned Shane Gaylis at the beginning of this discussion. There's no law on the books that says we have to go see him at a comedy club or watch him on Saturday Night Live. And that leads to my question of like, you know, how, like, oh God, now I done lost my train of thought. Okay, but basically my question is like, you know, basically in terms of cancel culture, like first off, what does that mean? Who sets the parameters for canceling? And how would you go about doing that? Like Dave Chappelle, I saw his recent special about the alphabet people. I thought it was hilarious.
I did too.
Now,
Yeah. It was so
the thing is,
funny.
I'm fully aware that
Yeah.
his kind of comedy is not for everyone.
Yeah.
Neither is Anthony Jeselnik,
Yeah.
whom I think is even more, you know, out there than
Right.
Chappelle. But my question is, when it comes to canceling, like, you know, what does that mean? Like, who determines cancellation? Like, you know, I've always wondered about that. Who's
Okay.
cancel culture?
If I may, I felt the same exact way, right? I feel like the market should be able to decide, and if people don't want to buy it, then they shouldn't buy it, right? But then I had to sit back and I'm like, well, damn, as somebody that is, I don't like the word minority, but as somebody who is a minority in this country, if we let the market decide, the market is dominated by white, conservative, whatever
Right,
men.
right.
So we
But
can't
they're
let them
going down.
decide because they've been decided.
Yeah.
They've been
Yeah.
deciding. So at a certain point, there has to be a part where even though you may not have the numbers or the buying power, your voice needs to matter as much, because if not, people still be doing blackface. You know what I mean?
Well,
if the
can
market was
we-
deciding, people would still be minstrelling because people decide to support those people.
Beck actually has a very insightful passage about how minstrelsy won't die. And I'm looking at you and wondering about the economics of cancel culture and how there's been a resounding, like, don't do that no more, but it still keeps coming around.
It's just couched in different terms. There's just different rhetorical strategies that comics can employ in order to say the same things and to act the same ways. A kind of, people think it's a clever mimicry of the other, to take on an affect of an other, to make fun of a gay person by, and it's always a gay man, right? It's always like, ah, woo. And there's,
Or a black woman.
or a black woman,
They do
the
that
sassy,
thing.
yep.
So fun.
Or a
And-
Jew.
They do Jews too.
And so, and they do that in the name of a lot of things. They say, well, you know, I saw that, therefore it's true, so it's comic authenticity. Or I experienced that myself. Or I have that best friend who occupies that category of identity, so now I can make fun of. There's loads of ways that people can get at doing exactly the same things that we've done before. And we act like we've done away with all of this negative, disparaging kind of comments about different groups, and it's out there in
Yeah.
spades.
Oh, absolutely.
I also think we need to be allowed to make fun of each other.
Oh,
I just think
yeah.
that needs to be said. Like, we should be allowed to make fun of the stupid ass stereotypes that are floating around in the world about all of our different cultures and all of our different backgrounds. Like, those conversations do still need to be able to happen.
But that comic
They don't
intent doesn't
have to be
necessarily get
racist, but we
received in
still
the
have to
way.
have conversations
Well,
about
you have
race
to know
and racial
people to make fun of them,
conversations.
so you can't
Right, you have-
make
it's
fun
about
of them from
education.
across the board.
Yeah.
Love,
But
right?
Yeah, so-
before you go on, let me go to the question the woman just asked.
Yeah.
You haven't really addressed it. Who cancels? Nobody. Nobody gets
Advertisers?
canceled in this society.
Yeah.
We live in a society now with lots of separate market segments.
Yeah.
And